Tucci.
Good evening, Jackie.
Get this to scroll down. Welcome everyone. Wow, it's interesting. See the echo? I hear the echo. So, welcome to Monday, March 1st, 2021, 6:30 p.m. meeting for City Council special meeting. This meeting is being held in person at the Sunnyside Community Center and via Zoom conferencing application. Information is below. To enable council members, city staff, and residents to participate remotely, if you're in person and have not already done so, please complete the form in the lobby so the city can maintain contact information for 28 days. Properly fitted face masks must be worn the entire meeting. City staff will provide masks if needed. Attendees will be expected to maintain social distancing requirements before, during, and after the meeting. Please allow one person to speak at a time and allow a moment in case of delay with sound. I will call on every member to make sure you have had an opportunity to ask questions. I will now ask the city clerk, Renteria, to start a roll call vote, please.
One moment.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Barstow. Councilor Farmer. Councilor Henry.
Here.
Councilor Tucci.
Here.
Councilor Hicks.
Here.
City Manager Casey.
Here.
City Clerk Renteria and Finance Director Alba.
Here.
Fire Chief Anderson.
I'm here. I'm here.
Thank you. Public Works Director Fisher.
Yeah, I'm here.
And then Deputy Clerk Janet is here.
Okay, thank you. We do have a quorum, so we will go ahead and continue. Our active agenda, first item is 2020-2021 budget update presentation. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. We are pleased to welcome you into this kind of hybrid environment. This is our first effort at blending the technologies of both in-person and remote participation. We are experiencing a little bit of feedback on the mics. Might suggest that for those of you who are not speaking, if you could mute your microphones if you're calling in, that might help with some of the feedback. Director Alba and I will jump into the presentation in just a moment, but just to kind of introduce this, we wanted to essentially give you a wrap up on 2020 and where we ended up financially at the end of the last budget year. We'll spend a little time going over where we are year to date in 2021, and then the heart of what Director Alba has prepared is an assessment kind of fund by fund of where we are coming in very healthy and areas where we're coming in, right on target, and any areas of concern. But we want to queue up a conversation with you about how you want to approach the first quarter budget amendment. And you'll see that question coming a little later in the presentation. With that, Director Alba and I will kind of tag team through this, but I'll turn it over to her to kick off the first slides.
So everyone will remember that we had a lot of things that were in the works, things that we needed to really fix. And the recession led to, a lot of things that happened with our budget, where we basically had to say, where are we going to find money to do this? Or where are we going to find money to do that? And a lot of times we spent money that we didn't always have. During the past 10 years, there were multiple funds that were overspent. General fund, ending fund balance was not reaching a 60-day reserve target. We actually had a couple years where it was only 2 or 3 days. So really, honestly, it was up to you as a council to decide to stabilize the general fund. And by doing that, you made a commitment to set aside $250,000 a year. And the one thing that's really good is we did end 2019 with all funds under budget and in the black for the first time in over a decade. And we also received a clean audit for 2019 and 2020. And in 2020, we closely watched our expenses. And everyone did a really good job of making sure that the COVID-19 pandemic did not, just rob our finances. We were able to use secure grants and all of that. And to do that, we had to work together. And I think that 2020, the good news for 2020 is that we came out okay. And we did have a lot of things that happened, including me being out for 3 months that wasn't anticipated. But I think everyone, kind of pulled together and worked together to strengthen our budget. If I could get the next slide. So in 2020, I'm just going to really kind of take a real high level here and, basically say, we had revenues and expenditures. We ended up with almost a $2 million balance, 1.9 million, which greatly exceeded our target, which was a great thing. And so I'm just going to hit on a few of the other funds. The street fund has been one that has slid in by dollars, it seems. And actually the street fund ended with $190,570. And then some of the other ones, tourism expansion fund, we were closely watching that because we knew that we had events that were canceled and we still had vendors that we were paying. That fund still ended with $212,000. So overall, we did very well in watching our expenditures. Our actual revenues came in very well. So if I could get the next slide. Our enterprise funds, the water fund came in with a $1.2 million balance again. That is taking into consideration all of the huge projects we've had in the water fund where we, did the water tower and started our base station and all of the different things. So we've really done a very good job in that of keeping that down and still being able to pay our debt service and maintain the rates for the last 3 years with no increases. Sewer fund at 2.3 million. Again, another fund that, they've done a really good job of keeping things up. And, we've had major projects like the screw press project. And I think we're just trying to get that one built up a little bit so that we can, look for future projects. Ambulance EMS fund is one that I have to say has turned itself around incredibly. We had a balance of 1.3 million. Almost 1.4 million come in for our 2020, which is fabulous because that was one of the funds that actually had to borrow money from the sewer fund. And we were able to pay that back last year in full. So that's probably the ones I'll hit on the most. And, really, it made me feel so good when I came in January and started running reports and I realized that we weren't in the black anywhere. We had hit all of our budget targets and, granted, we did have some budget amendments that we had to make, but that's just kind of a part of the process as things come along and you find out new information. So that's my portion of the 2020 budget summary.
I'll just kind of summarize. I want to acknowledge both Elizabeth and then, the entire financial team, as well as frontline employees and department heads who all pitched in last year to make sure that we weren't just, we were watching, of course, the general fund. That's where the lion's share of our expenditures and activity occur. It's where most of our public safety is funded from. And it's been one that's been at times precarious in the past. We worked very hard to be thoughtful about what we were spending, conservative in how we were projecting revenues, and trying to come out a little stronger in each fund than we had budgeted. Just as you can see. So at this point, very pleased to show that everyone's efforts really paid off, and we ended again with all of our funds in a strong position. And we'll come back to that here in a little bit when we start talking about kind of the opportunity that may afford council in looking at investments that you may want to make in 2021. But speaking of 2021, we'll go ahead and kick it back over to Elizabeth to let you know how we're doing so far this year. Spoiler alert, it's pretty good.
So this is a report that's just kind of high level again, just showing you where our actual revenues are coming in and our actual expenditures for the time
Elizabeth, I'm going to
frame.
pause you for just a second. Jackie, if you could advance to the next slide, number 5, please. Oh. Is that? Yeah.
Yeah, she was on the right one.
Okay, thank you. It was lagging somehow on my screen. Thank you.
So this should be approximately 15%, and you can see that the very, very bottom of this slide doesn't quite fit, but it shows that at this time, when I ran the report on 2/24, we should be about 15%. And when I look at this entire package here, what I'm seeing is very few funds are within the 15% mark. Most of them on revenues are over, which is a good thing. And most of them on expenditures are under, or if they are over, there's a reason for it. And it's usually a one-time insurance payment. And we make that payment in January. So I'll have you advance down to the next slide. And again, you can see that our revenues are coming in very strong. There's just really, when I look at this, there's not a lot of concern anywhere. We're coming in strong. We're still keeping our spending down. we're really well within what we're supposed to be. So this is one of the things that I have to say, our discipline that we taught ourselves in 2019 and 2020 is carrying over into 2021, and I expect it to continue. Our department heads and our teams are doing an excellent job of making sure that they stay within their budget and that we're living within our means, and we're taking advantages of the opportunities we can for grants when we can get them. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about excess fund balances. So we just mentioned the beginning fund balance, which is the ending fund balance in 2020. In the general fund, we have 1.9 million, but I've also had to take a hard look at our adjustments to expenditures. So in my absence, there was a few things that were omitted, and it was not anything that I haven't done, I'll be honest with you. And what it comes down to is occasionally you do an interfund transfer and it takes 3 different transactions for that to happen. And if you miss one budget on one spot, it makes you out of balance. And it's not really out of balance, but it just makes it look like you don't have that money where it needs to go. So we do have adjustments to expenditures, and the difference of those is 92,000. The difference in the beginning balance is a positive 592. So we actually have an excess fund balance available of $500,000. Same thing with the street fund, because we had more beginning balance than we budgeted. We had some interfund transfers and some adjustments to expenditures. We actually end with an excess fund balance of $64,000. And you'll see that trend where our beginning fund balances came in a lot stronger. Even when we adjust for expenditures, we still end up with excess funds. So you can see that happened in public safety, tourism, and if you could go to the next slide, I was going to say Delilah, Jackie. We have the only fund that's negative, and that is REIT 1, and the other one would be Fire Capital Projects Fund. And the nice thing about REIT 1, we have no planned expenditures for 2021. So having this negative won't be impactful for this year. And by allowing it to just sit there with no expenditures, it will build itself up over 2021. And then in 2022, we can actually plan for some expenditures in that fund. Fire Capital Projects Funds, this is $14,000 that was carried over from last year from the equipment build that didn't get finished. And so the capacity is there. So we're just going to go ahead and try to get that one added in. Water Fund does have excess fund balance available. And if you could go to the next slide, Jackie. You'll see our sewer fund as well has 163,000. Our garbage fund has 51,000. And you'll note the beginning balance started, we thought it would be $100,000 and it was 10. And the reason for that is there were 13 payments in Yakima Waste in 2020. This year we should only have 11 payments. So that will bring that beginning fund balance right back to where it should be. Ambulance fund has 510,000, and then stormwater 26,000. Again, we are looking very, very well at our excess fund balances, and I'm going to turn it over to Martin. He has some ideas for you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Some of these corrections and adjustments that Elizabeth has referenced are ones that we would be bringing forward as part of the technical corrections in the first quarter budget amendment in April. And this is, as you've seen in years past, kind of a discipline that we're introducing to make sure that the budget stays on track as we get either new information or identify things that we need to refine when numbers come in, the actuals come in differently than estimated. we still try to get as close as we can to real numbers, and try to estimate as effectively as possible. But that's sometimes hard to do when still trying to navigate what's coming on out of the pandemic and effects on revenues as well as on expenditure plans. But where this kind of brings us to an opportunity for discussion, and the conversation we wanted to at least queue up tonight and then let council reflect upon over the course of March, and then perhaps provide a sense of how comfortable it is with any direction. I'll reference back to the roughly $500,000 that in the general fund that are coming in excess of the amount that we had originally budgeted and planned or had anticipated for the beginning of this year. And Jackie, yes, let's go ahead and we'll go to that next slide. And keeping in mind that we may have potentially about a $500,000 stronger cushion than we had expected. We know council had to make a number of very difficult choices last year in prioritizing among the many enhancement requests that council members and department heads had brought forward. We knew that the fiscal realities, at least as we understood them at the time, meant that we couldn't invest in everything that you had prioritized. However, we are in a little bit healthier position now. It appears that most of our revenues have remained stabilized, and with the ongoing efforts at the federal level to provide support through stimulus packages, there seems to be a pretty strong commitment at the federal and state levels to continue supporting both economic activity, personal, individual economic stability, as well as shoring up some of government activities. And so the questions that we wanted to kind of queue up for you is, given the information you have at this point, might council be open to making some further investments among its priorities as part of the first quarter budget amendment process that we'll be preparing for you in the beginning of April? Or, given the information you have at this time, do you prefer to wait another quarter or two until the second or third quarter of the year when we have more information before you might entertain that? We do expect, and I know Mayor and others have commented at some of the recent meetings, there have been some small amendments that we've anticipated making based on your approval of certain contract awards or contract funding decisions. One was about $5,200, and I think the other was about $17,000. But those begin to add up pretty quickly, as you well know. And so we want to be very thoughtful about how we go into this process before we go forward. So that's essentially the question before council for consideration. The rest of the presentation is simply a review of the priorities that you had identified historically. The first slide, we recap the ones that you were able to purchase in the 2021 budget. These are all investments that you've already selected and adopted for either 2020 or 2021 as a result of decisions that you made last year. The remaining slides are the remainder of your ranked list of potential enhancements. We've kept them in pretty much the same ranked order. There's a few refinements here and there as we've gotten some new cost information or been able to refine some estimates, but most of this is just as you saw it last year. And then we close out with a few items that have come forward from the departments that might be responsive to emergent needs. That's there for your consideration and review as well. But with that, would like to turn it over to you to have some, invite you to have some brief discussion if you have some thoughts already, or we'll certainly be happy to get your feedback at a future meeting and get a sense of the direction council wants to go with this. And with that, that basically concludes it. Go ahead, sir. I'm sorry.
Quick roll, well, not roll call, but just a sentiment, see where council feels if we want to start now with the enhancement request or hold off until the next quarter. So we'll start with Deputy Mayor Broersma.
All right, well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So as I look over this list of all of these dreams that we think about and talked about over the past year and a half or two, one of the things I guess I'm a little bit cautious about is the notion of, well, we had a windfall and now we need to rush out and spend it. We've struggled for as long as I've been on council to come up with enough of a reserve fund to feel comfortable. And so I think when we finally do have something that is a little bit saved up, then I worry about rushing to spend it. I think, yes, there are priorities, there's things that we need to commit to do, but let's not lose our heads over this.
Okay, Councilor Restucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have to agree with the deputy mayor. I think with the uncertainty of the pandemic right now, we are in a good position, and I'm glad that we're in a good position because not all cities are. And so I'm leaning toward waiting at least until the second quarter, and we can revisit this again and see where we're at.
Councilor Henry.
I would have to echo the comments of my colleagues on this one. We'd definitely like to wait a little bit on it, but I'm definitely happy with where we're at and what's going on. I'm definitely really happy with our management. So thank you, guys.
Councilor Hicks.
With my constituents, I believe we should wait. Just because we have a little bit extra now doesn't mean in a month or two we will.
Councilor Farmer.
I would agree with my colleagues. I think we should wait.
Okay, there you go, my city manager. Sounds like most of us, myself included, I think playing a caution approach and wait to the next quarter, see how things are going and hoping for the best. But it sounds like we're in some good footing as far as being ahead of budget, which is great.
Very good. So thank you all. That's helpful. That'll allow us to kind of narrow the scope or maintain the scope of the first quarter budget amendment on those kind of technical corrections that we need to make. And then we'll look forward to having a further dialogue with you as we get ready for the second quarter process in early summer, by which time, hopefully, with vaccines and everything else, we'll all be able to be back in chambers.
Mayor, if I may, I just got one comment about that.
Go right ahead.
I would like to see next quarter perhaps on the list is some more hires for the city. I know we've been shorthanded for a while. We've kind of been cut back on that, but where do we need the most help right now is what I'd like to see when the time comes to look at that money to be spent. So thank you.
Okay, we'll be happy to look at that. We do have a couple of suggestions on the slides 15, but we'll continue scrubbing that internally and be happy to meet with you. Also, if you or any other council members have some ideas on where you'd like to see some targeted investments in staff positions.
Okay, is there
And
anything
may I
further
be
on
dismissed?
this agenda item, Mr. City Manager?
No, I was going to excuse Elizabeth Alba after this point, though. It's been a heavy day, heavy workload day, and so yeah, please enjoy the rest of your evening.
Elizabeth. Okay, our next agenda item is going to be Community and Economic Development Commission recruitment discussion. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor and members of council. We wanted, now that we are beginning to reemerge from the pandemic and some of the disruption that caused to our boards and commissions, we wanted to revisit with council how we as staff can kind of best support your process or come up with a process to help with recruiting and filling the Community Economic Development Commission. This was a body that council had just essentially created as we were getting into the pandemic. This is a little different than some of the other boards and commissions that council has created because while most are appointed, of course, at the authority of the mayor, most are just looking for a general category of resident interested in the subject area of that board or commission, whether it's recreation or arts or the airport or what have you. This one council identified specific sectors of the economy or of the community from which it wanted to see the membership drawn. And there's 7 members total, including council members serving ex officio. But the other categories, we've been trying to think, how do we best help you in recruiting for those? We have business owners and their managers or employees. We have commercial property owners, employment and job training services, and then education. And then just kind of an open category. We don't really have a chamber or organization like that already kind of represents or brings together like the business owners and managers. But we just felt like this would be a good time as we're coming out of the pandemic to get this commission stood up and be of help to the council. And I think it also will be of help to the staff. And just wanted to put it out there for your suggestions and feedback on that.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. And we'll go down our list and see if there's any ideas or suggestions that we can try to pursue and try to get this Economic Development Commission completed or filled with members. Councilor Henry, any comments or suggestions for this item?
I don't at the moment. I'd have to think about this and get back to you on that for sure.
Okay. Councilor Hicks?
Best I would say is reach out to our businesses, our commercial property owners, our schools and stuff, and see if there's anyone interested.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Burisma?
I would have to just kind of take off on where Mr. Hicks was. We have a lot of time and effort invested and thought invested really coming up with this list of the types of individuals we'd like to serve on this commission. And quite honestly, I still stand by it. I believe it was a good list. And so why hasn't this commission been filled? Well, we were interrupted by a pandemic and we couldn't get out and actively in person talk to people, encourage them to be part of this. All of these commissions seem to fall by the wayside over the last year. And we may have opportunity shortly for us to come together with people and talk about these things. And it might be easier to get them to commit. This type of commission is usually not filled by an advertisement on the city webpage. I think something like this is going to be filled by a one-to-one conversation where we encourage people, where we think about people who might be well-suited or think about people who might be able to give us good suggestions. So I'm still going to stand by what we've come up with.
Councilor Farmer?
I kind of tend to agree with the mayor. I think this is something that we can advertise for.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, I'm not sure that Councilor Farmer's mic is on or activated. He's not coming through on the audio.
Councilor Farmer?
Jackie, can you help?
Turn up the microphone.
thank
You can't be heard on the meeting. Is that a little better?
Is this better?
Mr. Casey, can you hear that better?
If you could say a few words.
Okay, I agree with Deputy Mayor Borisma.
It's still really spotty. Do we
Can you
want?
turn up the volume for his microphone, Jackie? Is there a way?
Both.
We're gonna try to get some more juice into the microphone, see if that
Okay.
helps. Was that better?
I'm not hearing anything. I don't know if other counselors who are remote are hearing him.
I'm barely hearing him, Mr. City Manager.
He's gonna try a different microphone.
Is this any better?
Yeah, Mr. Farmer,
Yes.
and
Much better.
Yes, that's better, Mr. Counselor.
Crucial for purpose of the committee and don't know exactly how we want to advertise in person business.
Councilor Restucci?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm sorry, Mr. Farmer, I couldn't hear what you said, but I'm going to agree with the deputy mayor and other members of council here. I'll volunteer my services to serve as the council representative on the commission, and I'll go ahead and recruit members to the commission if you want me to. It's something I've done in the past as mayor. I'm not shy when it comes to getting people to serve on boards and commissions. So if council wants me to do that, I'm more than happy to do so.
Thank you. One tool that might help us try to recruit some individuals is having maybe a description of what it is that we're looking for in a member and what are the benefits not only to the community but to the city in general as far as their contribution. So I could think of a couple of different individuals who I would like to approach, but I just wouldn't know where to start as far as telling them what the benefits are for their business, for the community, and how that would impact their participation, would impact the community in general and the business sector. So if there's something we can hand out to these individuals who might be potentially interested, I believe that would be helpful, and generate some interest, if anything, more conversation, and hopefully getting them to at least come in and talk to one of us as far as what the benefits are.
Well, and
We
Mr.
can
Mayor,
work on that.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
we could speak to John Cooper as well as John Smith at YCDA. I'm sure they've got materials and things of that nature for economic development. I served on the board for 3 years. I know that when we did our campaigns for money and things of that nature, that we had a number of one-pagers that we could hand out talking about economic development in the valley, how much money was brought into the valley, what industries are looking for dollars or for growth and things of that nature. So we might be able to reach out to both of those organizations to get some information.
Okay. And I have
Sounds like a great
contacts
idea.
with both. Be happy to do that.
Yeah, Mr. Casey, there's something that you can lead with those organizations and then pass on information to us. That way we could try to make contacts in the community and hopefully, get some individuals interested to get this group obviously populated and get some business done.
Very good. No, thank you. That helps us.
Any other council members with additional comments or questions or suggestions on this item? Okay, Mr. City Manager, anything else further on this item?
No, thank you, sir.
Okay. All right. Our next agenda item is going to be wireless communication facility ordinance discussion. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. This is actually a package. There's two ordinances coming up before you tonight for discussion and presentation by the planning supervisor. This is kind of the culmination of a lengthy process of monitoring the legal landscape and federal regulations and looking at what latitude, when all that dust settled, what latitude we still had around wireless communication regulations. But Planning Supervisor Shuttleworth has taken this matter to the Planning Commission, gotten their feedback, and also taken it. Now we've had our review by the city's attorneys, so it's ready to come to you. With that, I will kick it over to Mr. Shuttleworth to walk you through the draft ordinances. Our goal tonight is discussion and to to be able to answer or take back any questions that you have with hope to be able to then schedule this for action at a future council meeting here in March. Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you, City Manager. This is an ordinance, and as the council is aware, because there's been quite a bit of discussion, there is a process that we have to go through for the new technology, and that process is pretty well driven by the federal government saying what we can and can't do. The draft ordinance you have before you is similar to one that was adopted by the city of Topnish, and they had a fairly large law firm from the west side help them with that document. So as you look through the ordinance, basically part of it is still the portion that relates to large communication towers, such as the one there on Yakima Valley Highway and stuff. And then the just rest of it is for the 5G, which is the small antennas that will either go on street lights or existing poles. One thing we have noted as we go through this process is most of the light poles that are in the city of Sunnyside are actually owned by Pacific Power. So there'll probably be not only our process, but Pacific Power's process before they are allowed to connect to those poles. But we do have some poles, I believe, on Midvale and some out by the interchange that are city of Sunnyside light poles. And so we will be seeing people wanting to put on 5G. 5G, it appears there's moving through Seattle and other areas fairly quickly, and will be in Eastern Washington around here fairly quickly because a lot of the technology doesn't require the big infrastructure that the original communication facilities required. I won't go section by section by the ordinance, but please note a lot of it is driven by what the feds say we can and can't do. They have had some rulings that limit how long we can do a permit, how much we can charge for a permit, and a lot of other stuff because their idea is they want to make sure that the 5G technology can be placed in communities and they don't want a lot of restrictions. What we're looking at is our streetscape and how we can make these communication facilities fit in with the rest of the streetscape and not become an ugly eyesore. So that's my comments, Mr. Chair, City Manager.
Thank you, Mike. What would council's, Mike, just as a question or clarification for the sequencing, do you think it would be beneficial to discuss both ordinances together and then take questions, or do you want to take questions on each topic separately?
Probably each topic separately, because they are, while they're both related to communication facilities, one has to do the actual permitting through the planning department, and the other one has to do with allowing those facilities on our right of way through the public works department.
Okay.
All right, with that, we'll go down our list for questions or comments, and we'll start with Councilor Restucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to reserve my comments now. I'm still reviewing the ordinances, and we'll probably have some questions for staff at a later date.
Councilor Hicks.
I have no questions right off the bat.
Deputy Mayor Broersma.
Like Mr. Restucci, I will have to read over the ordinance and probably will have questions for staff later on.
Councilor Henry.
No questions at this time, sir.
Councilor Farmer.
No questions at this time.
Okay, and like everyone else, you have no questions either. So we'll wait for next time we discuss this, and hopefully we'll have some questions by then. And thank you for doing some of the research and getting everything set up for this amendment. So we'll go ahead and move on to our next agenda item, unless there's something else you would like to cover before we move on in our agenda. Okay, hearing nothing, we'll move on to our next agenda item, which is the small cell franchise agreement ordinance discussion.
Thank you.
Mr. City Manager.
I'll fill a little space here while Jackie scrolls through the packet. There's Mike put together an incredible wealth of information. I appreciate that. But it'll take a moment to get to the next item. So as Mike mentioned just a moment ago, this is related but a little distinct from that first discussion. This is the ordinance dealing with franchise agreements for the right-of-ways. And Jackie has caught up with me, so I'm going to turn it over to Mike because he's definitely the subject matter expert.
Okay, the reason for this ordinance is that while we do have mechanism for franchise agreements, communication facilities are going to be a little different on how we handle them because we're looking at light poles, we're looking at utility boxes and all kinds of other stuff that are kind of particular for the 5G system. So we thought maybe a specific ordinance, and there again, some of this is driven by the federal government on how much we can charge, how quickly we have to get the particular approvals for these agreements and all that stuff. So we're proposing this ordinance to look at specifically for 5G or for communication facilities within the right of way of City of Sunnyside.
Okay, we'll go down our list, which will have Councilor Henry to go on first.
No questions at this time, sir. No.
Deputy Mayor Burisma.
So as I was listening to this, Mr. Mayor, a question occurred to me, and maybe Mr. Restucci is the one who could best answer it. But as I recall, in the last few years, I remember there being 2G and it was upgraded to 3, and then now 4, and now we're talking about 5. We're going through all of these hoops, and how long is this going to be valid before they come up with 6G or 7 or continue to move on? It seems like we're having a lot of discussion about something that could only be in place for 4 or 5 years.
Did you want me to weigh in on that, sir?
I would love to hear your answer, Mr. Restucci.
Okay, no problem. Okay, so in order to build out an infrastructure like 4G or LTE, it requires a lot of planning, and it takes years to deploy a solution like this. Right now, 5G is only in probably 100, 200 cities nationwide, if that. And it's still got a long way to go before anyone can tell you there's nationwide 5G. But I would say that we're going to be dealing with 5G and 5G technologies for at least another couple, 3 years before a new solution makes itself available, if the technology market catches up with it. I mean, it really depends on how well 5G deploys. Right now, you only have 2 really major providers, AT&T and Verizon, that are deploying 5G solutions. And like I said, if you see the commercials and read the fine print, which I always freeze and read the fine print, you'll see that in most of the cases, it's not available everywhere. It's only in major cities right now. And although it's going to change the way we do internet, I mean, you know, you're looking at broadband solution on your phone. Right now, we don't have that capability. I mean, some people have those services, but right now, for the most part, you're getting, you know, a minuscule amount of data on your phone, or as much as the phone company can justify before they switch you, unbeknownst to you, to a Wi-Fi signal that's closer. And they're doing that now more and more. We're seeing that with cars. The OEMs will have 5G technology by 2024. According to the top 3. But even then, that's going to be for in-car Wi-Fi and connecting to RSUs, roadside units for intelligent smart highways, things of that nature. So I would say we're going to wrestle with 5G for at least another 3, 4, maybe even 5 years.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Councilor Restucci, questions or comments on this item?
No, sir. I want to thank staff for the work that they've done on this. Obviously, I've been very active in 5G and the lawsuits, as well as the changes in the FCC. We now have a new chairman of the FCC. And although she was a former commissioner, she is undoing a lot of what Chairman Pai did. And so it's kind of hard to know right now, Mr. Mayor, what the landscape's going to look like 5, 6, even a year from now, because the FCC is looking at stuff that was under the Republican leadership was put aside or stopped or changed in some way. And now Commissioner Warsenthal is looking at undoing some of those things. So it's going to be, it's a fluid field right now, Mr. Mayor, and I'm not quite sure what we're going to see in the next 6 months to a year.
Councilor Hicks,
No questions at this time.
Councilor Farmer.
No questions.
And I don't have any questions either. So again, thank you for putting all this documents together and giving us something to read when we find some time. And we'll definitely have to read it. It sounds like it's a pretty hefty packet. So thank you for taking care of that.
Well, and Mr. Mayor, I'll go ahead and provide council with information from the FCC regarding this particular scenario and what their plans were, the executive orders that were undone, the ones that were put in place, so council can see, because AWC weighed in on this because of the preemptive piece, and that piece is still in place as far as I know, which means, and maybe Mr. Shuttleworth can weigh in on this. If I'm not mistaken, the only thing that we can hold up a wireless franchise for would be aesthetics, correct?
Currently, my understanding is yes.
Okay, that's what I thought.
And those aesthetics, we have to treat everybody the same. So if we require them to do it, the power company, everybody else has to have the same criteria placed on them.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, so that concludes that item. Up next, we have upcoming council meetings. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. We appreciate your participation in tonight's kind of experimental first attempt at a hybrid meeting. We kind of pushed to try to do this tonight because it is a workshop format. We figured it would give us a good opportunity to kind of test things out and make sure things are working the way we would like before we get in front of a regular meeting with, as you can see, what's going to be a pretty full agenda and an opportunity for public engagement. So a lot of parts and pieces to work out. What you see coming up next Monday is we have a contract amendment for Target Solutions. This is the training platform used by the fire department, and we're continuing to get good value from that, and bringing forward a brief amendment for that. We may be bringing forward the hangar lease agreement. We've just sent it. We just received a draft and have sent it on to the attorneys and to Shane Fisher to review, but we've not had a chance to take a look at it very thoroughly. It may end up going out to March 22nd. We have the follow-on item, for the Catholic Charities upsizing agreement. This is the sewer project for the lift station that Director Fisher had briefed you on here at previous meetings in February. We're hoping to finalize that discussion and presentation, bring you kind of the numbers in detail, and then entertain potential action to amend that. That dovetails with the next item, which is the 9th and Lincoln lift station pump replacement. That's all part of that discussion, as well as the backup generator purchase. So we've got a number of things we're starting to package together to get ready for potential sewer system improvements. If council feels ready, we currently have both the wireless communication and the franchise agreement ordinances scheduled for next week. Given the amount of material that you're reviewing and the desire to kind of come back with further questions, we're comfortable with either leaving it on there as a possible action item, maybe adding discussion in front of them to queue up kind of both. But that's where we're currently looking at that. And then we have, and actually I've asked the chief to take a look at a third bill. We have three bills that have come to our attention related to policing reforms. A couple have to do with use of force requirements, and the third has to do with essentially cause of action and liability that may accrue to a city or individual officer as a result of their actions, changing the legal standards around litigation. The chief's taking a look at those, and we're working to kind of bring you information and entertain your suggestions as to whether you would like to take a position on any or all three of those bills coming up next week. All three are moving through the legislature at various rates. Both of the two currently on there have passed out of committees and are either on the floor or getting close in rules. So they haven't yet made it across from one chamber to the next, but they could move fairly quickly if they do. And so we just want to queue those up for you. And so depending on how much we end up keeping on the March 8th agenda, your March 22nd agenda may get a little fuller, but we just have a couple of items on there at this time. Then there were currently, I mentioned last time, we're hoping to bring you the iWork permitting software presentation as your main workshop item in April. It's currently scheduled by the vendor to go live for public users to begin interfacing with on April 1st. And so we're hoping to be able to have all that synced up for that workshop presentation. Do you have any members have other questions or other topics they'd like to see? But feel free to contact me or the city clerk.
Mr. Casey, is that all three? We covered all of them, it looks like.
Did I miss one? I think I got them.
All right, just making sure to go on to our next item, which is going to be an executive session for 10 minutes. And this is going to be RCW 42.30.110, parentheses 1, parentheses G, to evaluate the qualifications of an applicant for public employment or to review the performance of a public employee. However, subject to RCW 42.30.140, parentheses 4, discussion by a governing body of salaries, wages, and other conditions of employment to be generally applied within the agency shall occur in a meeting open to the public. And when the governing body elects to take final action, hiring, setting the salary of an individual employee or class of employees, or discharging or disciplining an employee, the action shall be taken in a meeting open to the public. And this executive session has a possible action at the end. We will now ask our city clerk to move our guests in Zoom to our virtual waiting room. And since we don't have anyone here at the community center, we will be okay. So once we get that, let me know, tell me what time, Jackie, it is, so we could start the executive session, please.
If I may,
Mr. Casey?
I was going to say, if I may, it appears that Councillor Henry may have inadvertently been labeled Director Fisher.
Yeah, I think that's right. That's what I have. Is the one that says Henry the one in the meeting right now? Councillor Henry, are you here? Shane?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Councillor Henry, are you here?
Is that you, Jackie? I can barely hear you.
Jackie, I can confirm, yes.
Public Works Director.
Yeah.
Right, Mr. Manager, that's coming over the Public Works Director Fisher's account.
Or at least it got labeled that way when he called in. So Jackie, yes, the phone line that labeled Fisher, Director Fisher, is actually Councillor Henry. Bingo.
Okay, got a motion by Councilor Restucci to adopt the contract and salary committee recommendations along with a 2.5% increase to the city manager's salary. Is there any discussion on this item?
No discussion, Mr. Mayor, but I would like to thank the manager for his work. Appreciate all the things that he's done so far. All the things that we did identify in your evaluation, sir, we really appreciate you looking into them, but the things that you're doing really well in, we want you to keep those up. Communication is definitely better than any manager I've worked with in my 18 years on council. So I appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, Jackie, can you do a roll call, please, on this item?
Deputy Mayor Burisma,
Yes.
Councillor Henry,
Yes.
Councillor Hicks,
Yes.
Councillor Farmer,
Yes.
Councillor Restucci,
Yes.
Mayor Guerrero,
Yes.
Mayor, you have 6 yes votes.
Thank you. And motion passes. And just for clarification, we're going to get this to our city attorneys to review before we finalize it. So great job so far, and then all the different areas that you excelled, Mr. City Manager. And obviously, I'm sure we'll have to be meeting again to talk about the great items and some areas that need some improvement. So thank you for the hard work.
Thank you.
Okay, and that's all we have for tonight. There being no further business to come before council, and without objection, I adjourn this meeting at 7:45 p.m.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you,
Good
everyone.
night, everyone.
Experience
Good
was
night.
interesting, and we'll have to see how it turns out for our longer meeting. But I think it's a good practice time for us to kind of work out some of the kinks and then do better next time. So thank you,
Very
everyone. Have a
good.
good evening. Good night.
Thank
Good
you.
night. Good night. Good night,
Not
Council.
all.